Welcome, you steamy SteamWorld supporters, you. I'll be the first to welcome you to another riveting episode of SteamWorld Telegraph. I'm your host, Brjann Sigurgeirsson, and today we'll be discussing SteamWorld design with two of our devoted developers. Andreas Persson from the station, Olle Håkansson from Image and Form team at SteamWorld Games. I should say welcome back to you, Andreas, because you've barely left the couch, right?
It feels like I live here now.
Both of you are, you have tons of experience being game directors, and we want to talk about design, game design today, and how that fits into the SteamWorld universe. And if we can start with you, Andreas, just tell us a little bit about your role, the role that you're in right now.
Sure. So as a game director, you could say I have the creative vision of the game. We work very collaboratively in the design team, but I have the final say, basically. Everybody's free to come with ideas, but I can say no.
You get to say no, all right, yes. And everyone has to do your bidding.
To an extent, at least.
That reminds me of something. It's like the privilege to say no, Olle. So I believe there was you got a mug from the rest of the team at one point. I can't remember what did it say?
Dr. No.
Dr. No, that was you, of course. Tell us a little bit about that. Where does that come from?
From having the same role as you, basically, and having to say no, maybe one time too often, I guess.
You guys also, I mean, you've worked on SteamWorld Games for. I mean, this is your first yes. SteamWorld game. How long has it been for you now, Andreas?
So we've been working on this for 2.5 years, so it pales in comparison to Olle's time with SteamWorld, for sure.
Olle, you started, as you mentioned, you got off with SteamWorld Tower Defense back in 2010. Just tell us a little bit about that game.
Oh, it's a tower defense game, which has... I think it's a pretty typical game, you know, tower defense, very simple game where the unique selling point is that you can control some of the towers. It's such a gem of a game, you know, because we made this game in, I believe, 2.5 months.
Yeah. It was super fast, yeah. But enough people found the game. We made our money back on that game, if I'm not wrong.
I believe so. I think we made,
making your money back on a game that took 2.5 months to make, I've always made it sound grand that, we made our money back on the game. And then it turns out it cost us like $1,000 to make the game, right? So
did we get paid back then?
What would you say, Andreas, has been, you're designing a game that you obviously haven't designed before, right? It's like it's a city builder, you haven't released a city builder before. So what's the takeaway when it comes to design? What's been easy? What's been difficult?
So one part was designing a SteamWorld game and just getting to know what makes a SteamWorld game tick. And then also a city builder, which we then combine with another game, which is the digging part. And it's not unique, but it's not that common either, that you need to cater to very different audiences. So in a city builder, you have people who just want to build. They don't care, but you want to leave room to optimize the city. You want to make sure that people who like to make progress can do that. And then you have people who like to make it pretty. So you have to make sure that how can we take something for each of the type of player, basically, which is really interesting and quite challenging.
What's it been like for you to design a SteamWorld game as opposed to something else?
Yeah, so when we started working on this, we of course we couldn't get a hold of Tower Defense, unfortunately. But we played all the other games and just tried to find what makes a SteamWorld game. And what we came up with was tight gameplay. We took taking something familiar and adding a twist to it. And then I always felt that they were very approachable to a new player. Even if I was new to a genre, if it was a SteamWorld title, it was very easy to get into.
And Olle, I mean, just on that topic, is there anything you want to add to that?
I think there's a certain type of goofy humor to the SteamWorld games that they're very... I think many people will understand that this was a game born in Gothenburg with they're known for their peculiar sense of humor, I guess. And I also like to think that a little hint of darkness is an important part of the SteamWorld games as well, that there is this underlying serious topics that maybe sometimes pop up to the surface, sometimes not as much. But for example, I really like that we got this the horror segment in SteamWorld Dig 2, where you are chased by Brjann Terminators.
Balancing of a game is really important as well. I mean, that takes something extra to get a really well-balanced game. How do you arrive at a difficulty that's like just right? Andreas, do you wanna go first?
Yeah, sure. There isn't really any shortcuts, I would say. It's a lot of testing and iteration. We use Excel a lot. One of our designers, Marcus, he has this giant sheet with everything from building costs to conversion rates for trade. And you can use formulas and such to get like a baseline, but then after that you have to start test. The problem is, and that goes back a bit to tower defense as well, like after a while everything is easy and you don't know anymore if should we balance this or is it good enough now. So we had to bring in new testers because you get too good at the game.
Well, I remember SteamWorld Heist, for example. How many difficulty levels did that game have? Like,
I think it's 5 or 6, right?
5 or 6, yeah.
Which is actually a thing because I got bothered by that when playing XCOM. That there's like normal, which is a bit too easy for me, and there's hard, which is way too hard for me, and I just wanted one in between, you know. And I think that keeps being a problem in a lot of games, and that's exactly why we made so many difficulty steps in Heist.
Testing you mentioned as well. I mean, testing is not only to set the difficulty, but also to get the players to understand the game, right?
You think you're very clear with what you do, and we had, for instance, a small circle that rotated around the button. You should press here, and people didn't see it. And then we asked code, can we get a circle that covers half the screen and just zooms in on the button? And there's like, we don't need that. Yes, we do. It's a process.
What other games have inspired you?
I think Super Metroid has been the biggest inspiration for me when it comes to the Dig series. Like, it's just a fantastic game.
SteamWorld Heist, is it the same thing there, or?
I think XCOM is the best reference. I realized not until afterwards, after release, I believe, that oh yeah, this is kind of like Worms, right? Like it's a lot like Worms. But yeah.
And how about you, Andreas? I mean, for SteamWorld Build.
Yeah, sure. For SteamWorld Build, there's obviously Dungeon Keeper. That was a big influence. Me personally, I play a lot of strategy games. So Firaxis, XCOM, Civilization is a big favorite of mine, and I also play a lot of like grand strategy games from Paradox.
What would you say are some of the pitfalls that you feel that we need to watch out for this, right? I mean, where do we need to be careful?
Complexity, like making overly complex systems that players don't really get.
How would it be too complicated? Like,
yeah, maybe just a tiny portion of the players would actually get and enjoy this, or maybe there's not enough time in the game to, you know, understand these systems that's in play.
Does that also then include feature creep, meaning that you want to have all of these things, like you're baking a cake and you want all of these wonderful ingredients in your cake?
You're talking to Dr. No, remember?
That's it, right?
No, feature creep is definitely a problem as well. It's very easy to try to fix a gameplay problem by adding another feature, and that's often, it's often a mistake to do it that way.
What would you say, Andreas?
Yeah, there's this quote from Soren Johnson, who was the lead designer for Civ 4, that goes along the lines of, given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun away from a game. Yeah. And that's something, especially when you're making like a system-driven game like SteamWorld Build, you have to keep in mind, because if there's an optimal way to do things, player will do it, even if it isn't fun. You also sometimes have to protect the player from themselves.
Olle, you've worked on a number of SteamWorld games. So what would you say? Like, what have you learned from those games?
So I think one of the key things to always remember is that the team is everything. Like, having excellent people with you on board for a project is the absolute most important part of making good games, I believe. You will always do compromises. There's never been like a SteamWorld game so far that was this like, this is our dream product. This is actually like no compromises done. Like, of course, it's always compromises. There's always cuts and so on, and it usually turns out well anyway.
Thank you so much, guys. Now we're going to turn to development updates. Today we're going to be looking at two of the maps that come with SteamWorld Build. And these two maps are the first one that we're looking at here. What is this, Andreas? Could you tell us a little bit about this?
Yes, Tumbleton. It's our Hollywood-inspired map. So you can see here, there's we have a cinema there that shows the good, the bad, and the rusty that scrolls on the screen, and there's a walk of fame, and it's also one of the few night levels. So when you play on these levels, all the buildings will have light coming out from the windows, for instance. And it's a really cool level.
Tumbleton, that rings a bell, doesn't it, Olle?
I think I've seen it in a previous game.
Exactly. And here we have the other map, which is Fossil Park.
Yes.
Andreas, please.
So that's, I don't want to get sued, but it's the Jurassic Park level. The entrance into the park, you can see that. So the train comes out from the gates, and you have old animatronics, a T-Rex standing that's broken down, and you have some skeletons in the sand and things like that.
And now for the community feature for this episode. This month it's been 10 years since we released SteamWorld Dig, the original. Everything just exploded with that release. Just give me what do you remember?
I remember feeling a lot of relief, of course, because we had kinda, what's the saying, bet all our horses on one race.
We had bet the farm, I think, right? We had bet the farm and the kitchen sink and our grandmothers and everything. Yeah.
So that was a relief that we still had a job to come back to after that release, which is very nice. And just seeing the reception, you know, like seeing that people liked the game, it's always a thing you're nervous about, of course, as a game developer. Will people like it? Will they buy it? You know, it's been quite a ride. Let's say it that way. We've had some more rocky productions, some more smooth. SteamWorld Tower Defense forever, and but it's been a lot of fun.
Andreas, do you want to add something now?
Thank you to Image & Form and Olle specifically for creating SteamWorld in the first place and making these awesome games and allowing us to be a small part of it. It's really fun.
Not a small part. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for joining me on this beautiful couch, and for much longer than we thought we'd be sitting here. And that's all that we had on the menu today, folks. Thanks for stopping by, and don't miss the next episode when we'll be lurking in the lore of SteamWorld. Bye for now.